Now, the traditional employment paths for classically trained musicians, the traditional path these days is to get an orchestra job. Now, let's take a look at some figures. Now, United States audition statistics. Approximately 700 new orchestral position candidates enter the audition circuit fresh out of music school each year. Now, let's just take a theoretical example. Imagine that no one except these 700 new faces are currently looking for a job. So that gives us a 14% probability of audition success. Let's just pretend that there are 100 available positions. These are kind of arbitrary figures, but they're somewhat realistic if you look at International Musician and other sources over the past 10, 15 years. Okay, so if we had 100 candidates auditioning for, if we had 700 candidates auditioning for 100 available positions, that would leave 600 unsuccessful candidates. Now, let's go on to the second year. We've still got those 600 candidates who haven't won a job. Now, let's assume, and this is probably optimistic, that 300 of those people just quit looking every year. They just quit. So now we take the 300 people remaining, add the 700 new candidates, and we've got 1,000 candidates auditioning. That gives us a 10% probability of success. If we go on, we see year 3, 8%. Year 4, 6%. Here we go. Year 5, 5%. 4% probability. By only 6 years in, you've only got a 4% probability of audition success. Going from 0 people looking and being somewhat optimistic in our figures, that means we have 2,100 unsuccessful candidates by year 6. So let's go down the road a little bit to year 10. Okay, now we've got a 3% probability of audition success. So, does music school still seem like a wise investment? It depends. Looking at this pie chart here, of course, most people would think, that looks horrible. Now, there are so many other factors that go in just besides these raw numbers. I'm just doing this as an example. This does not mean that you listener, watcher, viewer, necessarily have a 3% chance of success. And we have to think a little bit about what success is in the music world. But we'll get into that later. So this model assumes a reasonable rate of candidate attrition. We talked about this already. How about all the players who have jobs? That's the problem. They're also auditioning. What about the hundreds and maybe even thousands of players already on the audition circuit? Now, let's take a look at the real costs of a musical education. Okay, this is a little exercise, and again, sorry about the pessimism here, but I think it's worth going through this. Just information is always a good thing. So I like to call this the slippery slope. So check this out. Student likes playing music. Student studies with teacher, who is likely a freelancer. Teacher tells student that they can make it and get an orchestra job. Now, teacher tells student to audition for the best schools. Student auditions and is accepted at one of the best schools. Student plunks down $50,000 or more for each year of school. Now, student finishes school with a lot of chops, $200,000 of debt, and no tangible prospects. Teacher tells student to go to graduate school, but only, again, at one of the best schools. The student goes to graduate school for another $50,000 a year. That's a common figure. The student graduates. Job time, right? Well, we'll see. Student takes auditions, which can range from a wide variety of figures. Let's say $800 would be a fairly reasonable minimal figure. Maybe you could get less, $2,000 if you're a bass player. That's not unreasonable. The student maxes out credit card, educational debt, rivals medical school graduates. Uh-oh. Now, student gets notice in mail. Time to pay loans. Student takes job at coffee shop or bookstore, and any freelance jobs he or she can get. Student weeps quietly on bathroom floor at night, clutching stacks of past due notices and loan consolidation offers, lying atop yet another issue of International Musician, devoid of any auditions for their instrument. Depressing. Employment in the classical music field necessitates musical study at the collegiate level. Music performance degrees traditionally train musicians to do one thing very well. Employment prospects, even if you're optimistic, tend to hover in the single digits. And music school loans, unfortunately, I find this depressing, rival medical school students with a fraction of the income potential. So, the later parts of Road Warrior, my book, deal with finding a new path, trying to find just what's going to happen. Obviously, it doesn't look like more orchestra jobs are going to all of a sudden appear. I just don't see that happening. I wish it would. I love playing orchestral music. I wish I had an orchestra job, you know? But I see this trend continuing. So let's take a look at some options you may have going forward. So, structuring a musical career in today's day and age. Here are some examples of things we as musicians playing. This is based toward, I mean, come on, folks, this is based towards people who play some sort of classical music instrument and jazz to an extent. This really is not geared toward the rock musician, but, you know, I mean, a lot of these things are applicable. So let's just pretend that we're talking about someone who traditionally goes to study art music at a major conservatory. So here are your options. Full-time orchestral employment, the audition circuit, in other words. Part-time regional orchestra employment. Again, the audition circuit, kind of a different audition circuit, but pickup groups, parties and events, typical freelance work, jobbing, in other words. Church-related employment. There's a lot of this out there, more than you might think, and there are a lot of musicians who base their career on this as a cornerstone. Working corporate functions, again, jobbing. Recording work. There's less and less of this every day, but if you're in the right kind of environment, this is great. Sessions, you know. Educational performances in your group. University teaching. Full-time is kind of a different field than what we're talking about here, but that's, of course, great. Or part-time adjunct. Private teaching, a major component of many freelancers' lives. Contracting. Chamber music. And all sorts of other side businesses. So, you know, there are a lot of things that you can do as a musician out there besides your typical audition circuit. So those are just a few things. I go into a lot more detail in my book, Road Warrior, and, you know, I kind of flesh out all of these ideas on doublebassblog.org. I've got a lot of writings. You can go to doublebassblog.org/articles, and you can get a lot more information about this. So, hey, thanks so much for checking out this video. Hope this was informative, useful, maybe even a little entertaining, and we'll talk to you soon.